Fame. The dream so many chase, yet the nightmare so few are prepared for. We imagine it as freedom, but for many, it becomes a cage built from expectations, loneliness, and endless scrutiny. The world applauds you one day and forgets you the next. So, is fame truly the ultimate prize, or just the most beautiful illusion? If this breakdown made you think differently, share it with someone who's chasing the spotlight. And if you want more deep dives into life's hidden paradoxes, make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with me as we uncover truths most people never talk about. Paradox of overthinking. Overthinking is one of the most deceptive traps of the human mind. It disguises itself as logic, as careful planning, as being responsible. You sit in silence believing that if you just think a little harder, a little deeper, you'll finally reach clarity. But the opposite happens. Instead of answers, you get more questions. Instead of relief, you feel pressure mounting in your chest. Overthinking is like being trapped in a maze where every turn only leads to more corridors, more possibilities, more uncertainty. You end up exhausted, drained, and stuck exactly where you started. That's the cruel trick of this paradox. The very act of overanalyzing, which you believe will save you, becomes the very reason you can't move forward. It starts innocently. A simple decision appears, something as small as replying to a message or as big as choosing a career path. Your mind tells you to weigh the options, to be smart, to not make a mistake. So, you begin to imagine every outcome, every scenario, every what if. But the deeper you go, the further away you drift from action. Suddenly, the decision doesn't just feel important, it feels monumental. You convince yourself that the wrong choice could ruin everything, even if deep down, you know that's not true. The brain hates uncertainty, so it tries to control what cannot be controlled. And the more you try to control, the more tangled you become. This is why overthinking feels endless. You replay the same thoughts in loops, like a song that never ends. Even when you finally make a choice, you can't let it rest. You question yourself again, second-guessing whether you picked the right path. Instead of relief, you feel the shadow of doubt clinging to you long after the moment has passed. That's the silent damage of overthinking. It doesn't just slow your decisions, it steals your peace long after the choice is made. The truth is, life was never designed to be predictable. No amount of thought can eliminate risk or guarantee perfection. Yet the mind believes if it just runs the calculations enough times, it can escape mistakes and pain. But perfection is an illusion, and the chase for certainty is endless. Overthinking doesn't protect you, it paralyzes you. It drains your energy, creates anxiety, and convinces you that the only safe path is to keep thinking instead of acting. That's why overthinking masquerades as progress, but is actually avoidance. It's easier to stay in the mind, spinning in endless loops, than to step forward and risk being wrong. The way out of this paradox isn't to stop thinking. It's to stop worshiping thought as the ultimate solution. Reflection is valuable, but action is where clarity is born. You will never think your way into absolute certainty, but you can act your way into confidence. Taking even the smallest step forward cuts through the fog of indecision. And once you move, the situation becomes clearer, because experience teaches you more than imagination ever could. The paradox of overthinking reminds us that clarity rarely comes from sitting still. It comes from trusting yourself enough to act, to adapt, and to learn along the way. So, the lesson is simple. Don't let your mind trick you into believing that thinking more is always the answer. Sometimes the most powerful decision is the one you make without dissecting it to death. Trust that even if you stumble, you can adjust, grow, and recover. Perfection is never the goal, movement is. Overthinking steals your present, but action returns it. In the end, the cure to overthinking is not the perfect thought, it's the imperfect step. Paradox of social media was built on the promise of connection. With a single swipe of your thumb, you can step into a world filled with smiling faces, breathtaking sunsets, vacations you've never been on, and stories that seem to capture the best parts of life. At first glance, it feels like magic. Humanity woven together in one giant web, where no distance feels too far, no silence too heavy, and no memory too private to be shared. Yet beneath the glow of screens and endless streams of updates lies a truth that is harder to admit. The more time we spend online, the lonelier we often feel. This is the paradox of social media. The very tool designed to bring us closer ends up making us feel farther apart. not only from others, but also from ourselves. The reason this paradox cuts so deeply is because social media offers the illusion of connection without the substance of it. Clicking like on a photo, reacting with an emoji, or leaving a quick comment feels like participation. It feels like being present in someone's life, but in reality, it's shallow. It lacks the warmth of a voice, the sincerity of eye contact, the power of silence shared in a moment of understanding. Online, we don't show ourselves fully. We curate, we edit, we polish. The more polished our lives appear, the more distorted the truth becomes, not just for others, but for ourselves. We begin to measure our worth against filtered images and scripted captions, forgetting that these are highlights, not realities. Yet the brain doesn't separate them, it compares. It tells us that we're behind, that everyone else is happier, more successful, more fulfilled. And in that silent comparison, loneliness creeps in. Social media also reshapes the way we chase validation. Each notification becomes a hit of dopamine, a microdose of approval that makes us feel wanted for a moment, but the high fades quick. The paradox of social media reveals a deeper truth about human relationships. Convenience can never replace authenticity. Real connection is not built in likes, followers, or story views. It is built in vulnerability, in shared time, in the courage to be seen without filters. True intimacy is not scalable. It thrives in small, intentional acts. The phone call instead of the text, the walk instead of the scroll, the embrace instead of the emoji. So what's the lesson here? The paradox doesn't demand we abandon social media, but it does ask us to reclaim control. Step away from the endless scroll and notice how much time has slipped through your fingers. Ask yourself, are you truly connecting, or are you distracting yourself with the appearance of connection? Start choosing depth over surface. Call someone instead of reacting to their story. Sit with a friend without checking your phone. Let silence stretch instead of filling it with scrolling. Presence is the antidote to loneliness, not another notification. In the end, the paradox of social media is not about technology, it's about humanity. It reminds us that while we have created the most advanced ways to reach each other, we are still starving for the simplest forms of connection: a voice, a glance, a touch. Social media connects us broadly, but often disconnects us deeply. And when we finally learn to use it as a bridge instead of a substitute, when we let it enhance but not replace, we begin to rediscover the kind of connection that has no algorithm, human presence. Because true belonging cannot be found in pixels. It can only be found in people. Paradox of busyness. In today's world, busyness has become a badge of honor. People wear packed schedules, endless to-do lists, and back-to-back meetings like trophies, as if the sheer act of being busy proves their importance. At first glance, it feels productive. Your phone is buzzing, your calendar is full, and your time is consumed from morning until night. But when you pause long enough to reflect, a different truth surfaces. For all the activity, very little has truly moved forward. That is the paradox of busyness. The more we fill our days, the less progress we actually make on what matters most. Busyness tricks the brain into thinking that motion equals momentum. Every time you cross off a minor task, you get a quick hit of satisfaction. It feels like progress. But if you look closely, many of those tasks don't carry much weight. The emails, the errands, the calls that could have been avoided. These are the distractions disguised as achievements. Meanwhile, the important work, the kind that requires focus, courage, and creativity, sits untouched in the background. The truth is, busyness often becomes an escape, a way to avoid the discomfort of deep, meaningful effort. Filling the day with shallow tasks feels safer than facing the intimidating work that actually changes things. Another layer of this paradox lies in the addiction to busyness itself. When your life is constantly filled with noise and activity, you start equating your worth with how much you're doing. The more you run around, the more important you feel, as if constant movement proves your value. But this is an illusion. Activity and achievement are not the same. Busyness makes you look engaged, but often it robs you of impact. Like a hamster running endlessly on a wheel, you expend energy without moving closer to your destination. Multitasking deepens the problem. It feels efficient to juggle several tasks. Busyness also keeps us from stillness, and yet stillness is where clarity lives. Taking time to pause, reflect, and think is not wasted time. It's the very thing that saves time because it ensures you're moving in the right direction. Without it, you risk climbing the wrong ladder faster and faster, only to find it leaning against the wrong wall. The paradox of busyness teaches us that constant motion is not the same as meaningful movement. So how do you escape? Start by asking yourself each day, if I could only accomplish one thing today, what would truly matter? Focus on that before letting distractions take over. Practice single tasking, giving your full attention to one thing at a time. And most importantly, resist the temptation to measure your worth by how busy you are. Busyness doesn't define success. Impact does. The paradox of busyness reveals a powerful truth. Life isn't about how much you can cram into your schedule, but about how much meaning you can draw from the moments you choose. The goal is not to do more, but to do better. And when you finally stop mistaking busyness for progress, you discover that the path to peace and real achievement isn't found in rushing, it's found in focusing. Because success isn't about speed, it's about direction. Paradox of validation. Validation is something every human being craves, often without realizing it. From the time we are children, we learn to look outward for approval. Parents clapping when we take our first steps, teachers praising us for good grades, friends acknowledging us for fitting in. That external nod of recognition feels warm, reassuring, and affirming. It tells us we are enough, that we matter. But here lies the paradox. The more we chase validation from others, the more fleeting and hollow it becomes. What feels like nourishment at first quickly turns into a hunger that never truly goes away. The chase for validation feels natural. When you post a photo, share your achievements, or reveal a part of yourself, you wait for the response. Each like, comment, or word of praise feels like proof that you are valued. But as soon as the buzz fades, you feel the emptiness again. Instead of filling you, external validation leaves you craving more, like drinking salt water in an attempt to quench your thirst. And the more you rely on it, the more dependent you become. What was once a small comfort grows into an addiction. Your sense of self-worth becomes tethered to other people's reactions, and every moment of silence feels like rejection. At its core, the paradox of validation reveals a misunderstanding of where true worth comes from. Approval from others can be pleasant, but it can never be permanent. It is conditional, unpredictable, and often shallow. People validate what they see, the polished moments, the achievements, the outward image you present. But they rarely see the struggles, the failures, the quiet battles you fight when no one is watching. And because their validation is tied to performance or perception, it can disappear the moment you stumble. The applause that once lifted you up can vanish, leaving you wondering if you were ever enough to begin with. Breaking free from this paradox requires a shift. Instead of asking, do they see me? Do they approve? Begin asking, do I see myself? Do I approve of who I am, even when no one is watching? This doesn't mean shutting yourself off from the world or ignoring compliments. It means building a foundation of self-respect so strong that external validation becomes a bonus, not a necessity. Celebrate your progress even when no one else notices. Affirm your worth in private moments without needing applause. Surround yourself with people who appreciate your authenticity, not your performance. The paradox of validation teaches a profound lesson. No amount of approval from the outside will ever fill the void if you do not approve of yourself from the inside. External applause is temporary. It lifts you for a moment, but it cannot sustain you. True worth is built in silence, in the quiet confidence of knowing you are enough without anyone else's confirmation. The moment you stop chasing validation and begin creating it within, you discover a deeper kind of freedom. The freedom to live authentically, to act boldly, and to stop performing for an audience. Because the only validation that truly lasts is the one you give yourself. Paradox of happiness. Happiness is perhaps the most universally sought-after goal. From the moment we are old enough to dream, we are told that the purpose of life is to be happy, to chase it, secure it, and hold on to it as tightly as possible. We imagine that once the right conditions fall into place, the dream job, the perfect relationship, financial security, good health, we will finally arrive at happiness as if it were a final destination. But the more we chase it, the more it slips away. This is the paradox of happiness. The harder you pursue it directly, the further it drifts from reach. The problem begins with how society defines happiness. We are conditioned to see it as a prize, a permanent state of joy or contentment, a box to be checked once we've accomplished enough. Advertisements promise it, culture glorifies it, and even self-help teachings often package happiness as something to be gained through constant effort. But happiness isn't a finish line you cross. It isn't something you can possess forever once you earn it. When you reduce happiness to a checklist, achieve this, buy that, reach this milestone, you turn it into a moving target. Every time you hit one goal, another takes its place. The cycle never ends, leaving you restless and unsatisfied. This endless chase creates what psychologists call the hedonic treadmill. Each time you achieve something, a promotion, a new car, a long-awaited vacation, you experience a burst of excitement. For a moment, you feel like you've finally arrived. But soon, the feeling fades, and your sense of happiness returns to its baseline. The mind adapts quickly, normalizing what once felt extraordinary. And so you set a new goal, convinced that the next achievement will finally deliver lasting happiness. Yet again, it doesn't. You keep running, but the treadmill only exhausts you without bringing you closer to fulfillment. So how do you step out of this paradox? The answer lies in shifting focus from chasing happiness to living well. Instead of asking, how can I be happy? Ask, how can I live with meaning and presence? Engage in things that matter to you, not because they'll guarantee happiness someday, but because they enrich you now. Cultivate gratitude for ordinary moments, rather than waiting for extraordinary ones. Invest in relationships, passions, and personal growth, not because they promise a perfect emotional state, but because they bring depth and fulfillment. The paradox of happiness teaches us that joy is not found in constant pursuit, but in presence. When you stop sprinting after happiness and start noticing what is already here, you realize that contentment has been waiting in the quiet corners of your life all along. Happiness isn't something you conquer. It's something you notice, something you allow, something that grows naturally when you stop chasing and start living. Paradox of quiet people. In a world that rewards loudness, quick responses, and constant expression, quiet people often fade into the background. They sit in rooms filled with chatter, listening while others dominate the air with stories, opinions, and laughter. Their silence can be misread as shyness, disinterest, or even weakness. Yet, when they do choose to speak, something remarkable often happens. Their words carry a weight that cuts through the noise. This is the paradox of quiet people. The ones who say the least often have the most to say. Silence is easily misunderstood in modern culture. From school classrooms to boardrooms to social gatherings, we are taught to equate speaking with value. The louder someone is, the more confident or knowledgeable they appear. The quiet person, by contrast, is often overlooked, their presence underestimated. But this judgment misses the hidden truth. Quiet does not equal empty. Quiet often equals depth. While others are busy filling the air, quiet people are filling themselves with observation, reflection, and thought. They absorb more than they express, and in doing so, they cultivate a kind of wisdom that isn't always visible, but becomes undeniable when revealed. The paradox deepens when you realize that quiet people are not passive, they are processing. While others rush to speak, they take in not only the words, but the emotions, the body language, the tone behind the words. They notice subtleties others miss, the nervous fidget of a hand, the flicker in someone's eyes, the tension hiding in a smile. They connect dots that escape those too busy talking to see. Their silence isn't a void, it's an active gathering of details, a layering of insights that eventually distills into clarity. And when they do share, their words often come from a place of depth, not haste. There is power in restraint. Quiet people do not feel the need. Yet, the paradox comes with challenges. Quiet people are often misunderstood. Their silence can be mistaken for aloofness, when in reality, they may be fully present, just choosing not to add unnecessary noise. They may be misjudged as lacking confidence, when in fact, their confidence is rooted in self-control rather than performance. In environments that favor extroversion, they risk being overlooked entirely. But what others fail to see is that their strength is not in quantity of words, but in quality. So what can we learn from this paradox? First, that silence has its own kind of power. Just because someone is quiet doesn't mean they are disengaged. It may mean they are listening more deeply than anyone else. Their quietness is not emptiness, it is richness, waiting for the right moment to unfold. Second, it teaches us to value restraint. Not every thought needs to be shared, not every silence needs to be interrupted. Sometimes the most profound impact comes not from filling space, but from honoring it. The paradox of quiet people is a reminder to slow down, to notice the voices that are softer, to listen not just to what is spoken, but but to the silences in between. It asks us to recognize that the loudest voice is not always the wisest, and that true depth often lives in those who wait before they speak. Their silence is not absence, it is presence in a different form, a presence that sees, processes, and eventually shares something worth hearing. In the end, the paradox of quiet people tells us this: the world may reward noise, but wisdom often walks in silence. And if we learn to listen more carefully, we may find that the truths that matter most are not shouted from the stage. They are whispered in the quiet corners of the room. Paradox of change. Change is one of the few certainties of life, yet it is also one of the hardest things for people to accept. We often say we want change, better health, new opportunities, stronger relationships, or a more fulfilling life. We set goals, make plans, and dream about transformation. But when the moment comes to actually step into it, resistance rises. This is the paradox of change. Everyone wants things to be different, yet few are willing to embrace the discomfort that real change requires. The heart of this paradox lies in our relationship with comfort. Human beings are creatures of habit. The familiar feels safe, even if it isn't good for us. Routines, even toxic ones, create a sense of stability. So, when change threatens to disrupt that stability, fear takes hold. The mind whispers, what if this fails? What if it gets worse? What if I lose what I already have? And so, we cling to the very patterns that hold us back, mistaking safety for happiness. We demand new results while staying loyal to old habits, never realizing that transformation cannot exist without disruption. Change also carries a hidden tension between desire and fear. The desire pushes us forward. We imagine the benefits, the rewards, the new life waiting for us. But fear pulls us back. The unknown feels heavy, uncertain, uncontrollable. This tug of war creates paralysis. You may spend years wanting to change, but never taking the first step, because the comfort of what is feels less terrifying than the uncertainty of what could be. That's why so many people live lives that look unchanged for decades, even though they carry unfulfilled dreams within them. Another layer of this paradox is the truth that change rarely feels good while it's happening. Growth is uncomfortable. Breaking habits requires discipline. Creating new paths takes energy, and stepping into uncertainty stirs anxiety. We often expect change to feel exciting, but more often it feels exhausting and unsettling. It only looks beautiful in hindsight when the benefits are clear. During the process, it can feel like chaos, loss, or even failure. That is why so many people give up midway. They mistake discomfort for a sign they are on the wrong path, when in reality, discomfort is proof that transformation is taking place. And yet, here's the irony. Resisting change doesn't prevent it. Life changes regardless. Seasons shift, people grow, relationships evolve, opportunities come and go. The more you cling to the illusion of permanence, the more painful change becomes when it finally arrives. But when you lean into it instead of fighting it, you discover that change often carries hidden gifts, lessons, growth, and possibilities you never imagined. The things you feared losing can open space for something greater. So how do we break free from this paradox? It begins with reframing discomfort. Instead of seeing it as danger, recognize it as a signal of growth. Every meaningful transformation comes with unease. Think of exercise. Muscles ache before they grow stronger. Or learning, confusion comes before clarity. Change works the same way. The discomfort you feel isn't a sign to turn back. It's evidence that you are stepping beyond the boundaries of who you used to be. The paradox of change teaches us that transformation is not about eliminating fear, it's about moving forward in spite of it. Courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision that something else matters more. Every step into change requires faith. Faith in yourself, faith in the process, and faith that the unknown holds opportunities you cannot yet see. In the end, the paradox of change reminds us of a profound truth. While we may long for things to remain steady, life itself is built on movement. Stagnation is not safety, it is slow decay. To grow, to evolve, to live fully, we must accept that change is not the enemy, but the doorway. And though stepping through it may feel terrifying, it is often the very thing that brings us closer to the life we've been seeking all along. Paradox of friendship. Friendship is one of the most beautiful gifts life offers. It is the bond that makes laughter brighter, burdens lighter, and ordinary days feel meaningful. Friends provide comfort in times of struggle and joy in times of celebration. Yet, friendship is also fragile. The same closeness that makes it precious can also make it vulnerable to jealousy, distance, or misunderstanding. This is the paradox of friendship. The very bond that gives us strength also exposes us to the possibility of deep hurt. At its core, friendship thrives on vulnerability. To let someone into your life as a true friend, you have to lower your defenses, reveal your struggles, and trust them with parts of yourself that you don't show to the world. This openness is what creates intimacy. It turns acquaintances into confidants. But the same vulnerability that makes friendship real also makes it risky. Because when a friend disappoints you, betrays you, or drifts away, the pain cuts deeper than any casual relationship ever could. The depth of connection gives the depth of the wound. Another layer of the paradox is how friendship changes with time. In youth, friendships often feel effortless. Proximity, classrooms, neighborhoods, shared routines creates closeness without much effort. But as life moves forward, careers, responsibilities, and families begin to reshape the rhythm of connection. Distance grows, not necessarily from lack of love, but from the demands of life. Many friendships fade not because of conflict, but because of silence. And yet, some friendships, even after long gaps, have the power to resume as if no time has passed. This contrast is part of what makes friendship both mysterious and unpredictable. Friendship also carries the paradox of jealousy and comparison. True friends celebrate each other's successes, but sometimes, beneath the surface, envy stirs. When a friend achieves what you secretly long for, it can feel like their gain highlights your lack. This isn't because you don't love them. It's because human emotions are complex. Navigating this tension is part of the challenge of friendship, to celebrate without comparison, to support without resentment. At the same time, friendship requires balance. It asks for loyalty but not possession, closeness but not suffocation, honesty but also patience. Too much expectation can strain the bond, yet too little investment can let it fade. The paradox is that friendship feels natural and effortless, but it actually requires effort, intentional communication, forgiveness, and the ability to weather seasons of distance or disagreement. It is not just built in the laughter of good times, but also in the resilience during hard times. And yet, despite the risks, friendship is worth it, because while it can hurt, it also heals. A true friend can be the mirror that reflects your best self when you've forgotten who you are. They can be the anchor when life feels unsteady, the hand that lifts you when you fall, the reminder that you are not alone in the world. The pain of broken friendships is real, but the gift of true friendship is immeasurable. The paradox of friendship teaches us this: the possibility of loss is the price of connection. To have friends is to accept risk, to open yourself to both joy and sorrow. But without that risk, life becomes colder, more isolated, and far emptier. The beauty of friendship lies in its uncertainty. It can break, but it can also last a lifetime. And when it does, it becomes one of the deepest sources of meaning we can ever know. Paradox of love. Love is the most powerful force we experience, yet also the most complicated. It inspires art, fuels sacrifice, and gives meaning to existence. At its best, love makes us feel alive in ways nothing else can. It softens our edges, heals our wounds, and shows us glimpses of eternity in the presence of another person. But love is also unpredictable, fragile, and at times painful. This is the paradox of love. The very bond that brings us our greatest joy can also cause our deepest sorrow. At the heart of this paradox lies vulnerability. To love is to open yourself fully, to let someone see not just your strengths, but your flaws, your fears, your wounds. Love demands trust, and trust means surrendering control. You cannot guarantee how the other person will act, feel, or change over time. By giving your heart, you expose yourself to the possibility of heartbreak. And yet, without this risk, love cannot exist. The very thing that makes love meaningful, the openness and surrender, is the same thing that makes it fragile. Another aspect of the paradox is how love balances freedom and attachment. Real love requires closeness, intimacy, and connection. But at the same time, it also requires freedom, the willingness to let the other person be themselves without control or possession. When love becomes suffocating, it loses its essence. But when it allows space, it thrives. The paradox is that the more you try to hold on too tightly to love, the more it slips through your fingers. Only when you allow freedom does the bond deepen. Love also carries the paradox of expectation. We often imagine love as something that should make us happy all the time. Movies, songs, and stories paint it as effortless bliss. But real love is not constant euphoria. It is work, patience, compromise, and resilience. There are moments of joy, but also misunderstandings, arguments, and disappointments. Love does not erase struggle. It weaves struggle into the fabric of connection. The paradox is that love can be both the source of peace and the source of conflict, both a comfort and a challenge. The paradox of love also reveals itself in loss. To love deeply is to risk grief, because nothing in life is permanent. Relationships end, people change, and even the strongest bonds are eventually tested by time or mortality. The pain of losing love can feel unbearable. But this is the price of love. The greater the joy it gives, the deeper the ache when it is gone. Yet even in loss, love leaves behind traces that shape us forever. It teaches us, changes us, and stays with us in memory and in growth. And yet, despite all its risks and contradictions, we continue to seek love. Why? Because without it, life feels empty. Achievements, wealth, and success may fill our days, but they rarely fill our hearts. Love, with all its imperfections, gives us belonging. It reminds us that we are not alone, that our lives are not just about ourselves. Love expands us. It makes us more compassionate, more human, more alive. The paradox of love teaches us that the very thing that can break us is also the thing that completes us. It asks us to accept risk, embrace imperfection, and find beauty in both the joy and the pain. To love is to be vulnerable, but it is also to be brave. And in the end, the risk is worth it, because even if love does not last forever, the experience of it transforms us in ways nothing else can. Love hurts, but it also heals. It is fragile, but it is also eternal. That is its paradox, and that is its power. Paradox of time. Time is the most precious resource we have. Unlike money, it cannot be earned back once spent. Unlike possessions, it cannot be stored away for later use. Each moment slips away silently, never to return. We know this, yet we often treat time as if it were infinite, wasting hours on distractions, waiting for someday to begin living fully. This is the paradox of time. The more we try to hold on to it, the faster it seems to slip away, and the more we ignore it, the more we regret its loss. At its core, time feels contradictory because of how we experience it. When we are engaged in something we love, hours feel like minutes. But when we are stuck in boredom, waiting, or suffering, minutes feel like hours. Time itself doesn't change. Our perception of it does. This is why some days feel endless while others vanish in a blur. The paradox is that we all live by the same measure of time, yet no two people experience it in the same way. Another layer of the paradox is how we use time. We spend much of life preparing for the future, working, saving, planning, believing that happiness lies ahead. Yet when the future arrives, it often feels no different from the present we once rushed through. Many people look back and realize they were always waiting for later without ever fully living now. In trying to secure time for the future, they sacrifice the time they already had. This is the tragedy of postponement. Life is not something that begins later. It is happening here and now. Time also challenges us with its unpredictability. We live as if we have endless tomorrows, but none of us knows how many are truly left. This creates another paradox. To live wisely, we must plan for the future, as if it matters, yet we must also live each day as if it could be our last. Lean too far into the future, and you miss the present. Focus only on the present, and you risk neglecting what comes next. The art of living lies in balancing both. The awareness that time is limited and the discipline to use it intentionally. The paradox of time also reveals itself in aging. As children, time feels abundant. Summers feel endless, days stretch wide, and the future feels far away. But as we grow older, the years begin to collapse into one another. Birthdays come quicker, seasons pass faster, and suddenly decades feel like they've vanished in the blink of an eye. The older we get, the more precious time feels, not because it has changed, but because we finally realize how little of it we truly control. So how do we live within this paradox? The answer lies in presence. Time becomes meaningful when we stop chasing it or fearing it, and instead begin to notice it. When you are fully present in a conversation, a meal, or a walk outside, time slows down, moments expand, and life feels fuller. Gratitude also transforms time. When you appreciate the moment you're in, you stop waiting for something better to arrive. The paradox of time teaches us that life is not measured by how long we live, but by how deeply we live. It is not about cramming as much as possible into our hours, but about choosing what truly matters. The greatest regret at the end of life is not running out of time. It is realizing you never really lived in the time you had. Time cannot be stopped, but it can be honored. It cannot be stored, but it can be savored. And though we cannot control how much of it we are given, we can control how we use it. That is the paradox of time. The more you cling to it, the more it escapes you, but the more you embrace it, the richer it becomes. Paradox of attention. Attention is one of the most valuable currencies of the modern age. Companies compete for it, people demand it, and our devices are designed to capture it every second of the day. Where our attention goes, our life follows, because attention determines what we notice, what we nurture, and ultimately what we become. Yet, here lies the paradox of attention. The more we scatter it across everything, the less meaningful it becomes, and the more we try to focus on everything, the less we truly focus on anything at all. At its core, attention is limited. The human brain can only consciously process so much at once. Yet, in our overstimulated world, we are constantly pulled in dozens of directions. Notifications, conversations, work demands, entertainment, news, and endless streams of information. The result is divided attention. We try to multitask, believing it makes us efficient, but instead it weakens our ability to give depth to anything. When attention is spread thin, life feels rushed, shallow, and unsatisfying. This paradox becomes even sharper in relationships. We think giving someone partial attention, listening while scrolling, nodding while distracted, is enough, but people feel when they are not truly seen or heard. Real connection requires undivided attention, and without it, relationships weaken. Ironically, in trying to give our attention to everything, we end up giving our presence to no one. Another layer of this paradox lies in desire. The things we focus on expand in importance. If you give your attention to problems, they grow heavier. If you give it to gratitude, joy multiplies. Attention is like sunlight. It nourishes whatever it shines on. The paradox is that while attention has incredible power, most of us give it away carelessly, without realizing what it is doing to our minds and lives. We allow algorithms, advertisers, and distracting minds to decide where our focus goes, and in doing so, we lose control over the direction of our lives. Attention also creates tension between urgency and meaning. Urgent things, emails, pings, alerts, demand attention immediately. Important things, relationships, health, creativity, personal growth, quietly wait in the background. Without discipline, urgency always wins, and meaning is neglected. This is why so many people feel busy but unfulfilled. Their attention is consumed by noise, while the things that truly matter receive only scraps of focus. And yet, here is the deeper truth. Attention is not just about productivity, it is about presence. When you give your full attention to a moment, it becomes richer. Eating slowly, walking without distraction, listening fully. These simple acts transform ordinary experiences into profound ones. Attention has the power to stretch time, to deepen connection, and to turn small details into meaningful memories. So how do we live within this paradox? By learning to direct our attention intentionally, instead of allowing it to be stolen. This means creating boundaries with distractions, practicing focus on one thing at a time, and choosing carefully where we place our mental energy. It also means practicing presence, being fully in the moment rather than splitting yourself between the now and the noise. The paradox of attention reveals a powerful lesson. Life is not determined by how much time we have, but by what we choose to give our attention to. Where your attention goes, your life follows. Scatter it, and life feels thin. Focus it, and life feels full. Attention may be limited, but when used wisely, it creates abundance. Paradox of rest. Rest seems simple. You stop working, take a break, and recharge. Yet in today's culture, rest has become strangely difficult. Many people feel guilty when they rest, as if taking time off makes them lazy or unproductive. Others mistake rest for distraction, filling their downtime with endless scrolling or shallow entertainment that leaves them even more drained. This is the paradox of rest. The more we avoid it, the more we need it, and the more we chase false versions of it, the less rested we truly feel. At its core, rest is not just the absence of work, it is the presence of renewal. Real rest restores energy, clears the mind, and nourishes the body. But in a world that glorifies busyness, rest is often seen as weakness. People brag about sleepless nights and overfilled schedules, as if exhaustion were proof of dedication. Yet this constant hustle leaves them depleted, unable to give their best. The paradox is that by refusing to rest, we actually diminish the very productivity and success we are chasing. Rest is also misunderstood because not all rest is equal. Many believe mindless distraction, binge-watching, scrolling through feeds, or numbing out is rest. But these activities rarely restore us. Instead, they overstimulate the brain and leave us more restless than before. True rest is intentional. It might look like sleep, stillness, time in nature, or deep conversation that refreshes the spirit. It is not about escaping life, but about re-entering it with more clarity and strength. Another layer of the paradox lies in how rest and effort are intertwined. We often think success comes from constant pushing, from never stopping. But in reality, growth requires cycles of effort and renewal. Just as muscles grow stronger through both exercise and recovery, the mind becomes sharper when work is balanced with true rest. Without rest, creativity fades, focus weakens, and motivation burns out. In the rush to gain more, people end up losing the energy to enjoy what they already have. There's also the psychological weight of guilt around rest. Many people cannot relax because, even when resting, their minds are racing with thoughts of what they should be doing. This robs rest of its power. Real rest requires permission, the acceptance that slowing down is not wasted time, but necessary time. Without this shift, rest becomes another task on the to-do list, performed half-heartedly, leaving us unsatisfied. And yet, when we allow ourselves to rest fully, something powerful happens. Clarity returns. Ideas surface effortlessly. Energy rebuilds. Problems that seemed overwhelming shrink into manageable size. Rest is not the enemy of progress. It is its fuel. The paradox is that by stepping back, we move forward faster. So how do we live within this paradox? By redefining rest not as laziness, but as wisdom. Rest is part of productivity, not its opposite. It means honoring your body's limits, your mind's need for stillness, and your spirit's need for peace. It also means choosing rest that restores, sleep, reflection, nature, silence, rather than numbing yourself with distraction. The paradox of rest teaches us that doing nothing is sometimes the most powerful something you can do. In a culture that glorifies constant activity, rest becomes an act of courage, a refusal to burn out for the sake of appearances. Rest is not weakness, it is preparation. It is the foundation that allows us to rise again with strength, focus, and clarity. Paradox of perfectionism. Perfectionism often disguises itself as ambition. It tells you that you are simply striving for excellence, that aiming higher than everyone else is what sets you apart. At first, it feels like a strength, an inner drive that pushes you to achieve, polish, and refine. But the deeper you fall into it, the more it reveals its hidden cost. This is the paradox of perfectionism. The harder you try to be perfect, the further you move from real progress, growth, and peace. At its core, perfectionism is built on fear, not excellence. The perfectionist doesn't just want to succeed, they want to avoid failure at all costs. Every mistake feels like proof of inadequacy, every flaw like a weakness that must be erased. Instead of focusing on learning and improving, perfectionism shifts the focus to hiding flaws and avoiding judgment. Ironically, this obsession with perfection often prevents people from taking risks, experimenting, or creating boldly, the very actions that lead to real success. The paradox also shows up in productivity. Perfectionists often spend endless hours polishing details that don't matter, delaying action in the name of getting it right. They may procrastinate out of fear that their work won't measure up, leaving projects unfinished. What looks like high standards is often just fear in disguise. The more they demand flawlessness, the more paralyzed they become, stuck in cycles of overthinking and self-criticism. Instead of moving forward imperfectly, they remain trapped in the illusion of someday perfection. Another layer of the paradox lies in relationships. Perfectionism doesn't just affect personal standards, it spills into how we treat others. A perfectionist may hold those around them to impossibly high expectations, leading to disappointment, frustration, or control. In trying to create the perfect relationship, they suffocate it. In trying to appear flawless, they create distance from others who long to see their real, imperfect humanity. The result is isolation, even when surrounded by people. And yet, here is the deeper truth. Perfectionism never delivers what it promises. It whispers that if you can just be flawless, then you'll finally feel secure, loved, and worthy. But perfection is an illusion. There is always another flaw to fix, another standard to chase, another comparison to lose. The chase never ends, and the sense of worthiness never arrives. What perfectionism hides is the fact that peace doesn't come from flawlessness, it comes from acceptance. The paradox of perfectionism is that imperfection is not a failure, but the very thing that makes growth possible. Every mistake carries a lesson, every flaw makes us human, and every setback creates strength. The more you try to erase imperfection, the more you erase your chance to learn, connect, and live fully. True excellence doesn't come from avoiding mistakes, it comes from moving forward despite them. So how do we step out of this paradox? By embracing progress over perfection, by choosing action, even if it's messy, by realizing that authenticity matters more than flawlessness, and by reminding ourselves that growth happens not in polished moments, but in the raw, unfinished, imperfect ones. The paradox of perfectionism teaches us a liberating truth. The more you demand perfection, the further you drift from real fulfillment. But when you embrace imperfection, you find freedom. You discover that worthiness was never in flawlessness. It was always in the courage to be real, to try, and to grow. Paradox of clarity. Clarity is something we all long for. We want to know exactly what path to take, what choice to make, and what future lies ahead. We crave certainty because uncertainty feels uncomfortable, even threatening. Clarity promises peace, direction, and relief from doubt. Yet, here's the paradox of clarity. The harder you chase it, the more it escapes you. And often, clarity only appears after you've already taken action, not before. At its core, clarity feels elusive because life is never fully predictable. We imagine that if we think long enough, plan carefully enough, or analyze deeply enough, the perfect answer will present itself. But life rarely works that way. Overthinking clouds the mind instead of clearing it, and waiting endlessly for certainty leaves us stuck in paralysis. The paradox is that clarity doesn't arrive from sitting still. It emerges through movement, through trial, through stepping into the unknown. Another layer of this paradox lies in fear. We often delay decisions, telling ourselves we are waiting for clarity, when in truth, we are avoiding risk. We want to guarantee success before acting, to eliminate the chance of failure. But in reality, no amount of waiting will erase risk. Clarity does not remove uncertainty. It teaches us to walk alongside it. The more you resist uncertainty, the foggier life feels. The moment you accept uncertainty as part of the journey, the clearer things begin to appear. Clarity also reveals itself gradually, not all at once. Sometimes you only understand the path by walking it. Think of times in your life when you weren't sure what to do, but you made a choice anyway. Only later, in hindsight, did the pieces fit together. Clarity often comes after the decision, not before it. That's why waiting for perfect certainty can keep you stuck forever. Clarity is born in the doing, not in the endless preparing. Though, here is also a paradox in how clarity relates to control. We believe that if we had more control over life, we would feel clearer. But often the desire for control is what clouds our perspective. The tighter we cling, the more anxious we become. Sometimes clarity arrives not through control but through surrender, through letting go of the need to know everything right now, and trusting that the path will reveal itself step by step. And yet, clarity is not about eliminating confusion entirely. It is about finding enough direction to take the next step. You don't need the full map. You only need the courage to move forward with the piece you can see. The paradox is that by acting with partial clarity, you invite greater clarity to unfold. Action sharpens perspective, while inaction blurs it. So how do we live within this paradox? by shifting our understanding of clarity. Instead of waiting for it to appear perfectly before moving, we accept that clarity grows through action. Instead of treating confusion as failure, we see it as part of the process. And instead of demanding certainty, we learn to trust ourselves enough to move forward without it. The paradox of clarity teaches us that light doesn't always come before the step. It often comes after. The path reveals itself to the walker, not the one waiting at the crossroads. True clarity is not about knowing everything in advance. It's about having the courage to begin, trusting that understanding will come as you move. Paradox of success. Success is one of the most celebrated achievements in life. From childhood, we are told to aim high, work hard, and chase dreams until they become reality. Success is painted as the ultimate reward: security, respect, happiness, and freedom all wrapped into one. Yet the reality is far more complex. This is the paradox of success. The very thing we pursue for fulfillment often leaves us feeling empty, and the higher we climb, the heavier the burden becomes. At its heart, success is defined by society as reaching goals, gaining recognition, or achieving status. But once people reach those milestones, they often find that the satisfaction is fleeting. The joy of a promotion fades after a few weeks. The thrill of an award dulls quickly. Even financial abundance, once achieved, loses its shine as the mind begins to crave the next milestone. Success, instead of being an end, becomes a moving target. No matter how much you achieve, it never feels like enough. The paradox deepens when success begins to reshape identity. Many people tie their worth to their accomplishments, believing they are only valuable as long as they keep winning. This creates pressure to maintain the image of success at all costs. But the more success you achieve, the more you fear losing it. What once motivated you now traps you, because failure no longer feels like a lesson. It feels like losing yourself. Success, instead of freeing you, can enslave you to constant performance. Another side of the paradox is how success can isolate. Achieving great things often requires sacrifice, long hours, missed connections, relentless focus. While these sacrifices can build careers or fortunes, they can also strain relationships and erode balance. Success can leave you celebrated in public but lonely in private. The applause may be loud, but when it fades, you may wonder if the cost was worth it. And yet, despite its illusions, success is not meaningless. The paradox is not that success is bad, but that it cannot deliver everything it promises. Success can provide comfort, stability, and opportunities, but it cannot guarantee fulfillment. Fulfillment comes not from reaching goals, but from aligning with values, from doing work that matters, from building relationships that endure beyond titles and trophies. The paradox of success also teaches us about perspective. For some, success is about wealth. For others, it's about impact. For others still, it's about inner peace. The truth is that success has no universal definition. It is deeply personal. But when you allow society to define it for you, you risk climbing a ladder that leads to emptiness at the top. True success is not found in comparison, but in alignment with who you are and what gives your life meaning. So how do we live within this paradox? By redefining success not as a finish line, but as a journey. By understanding that achievement is valuable, but it is not everything. By remembering that balance, relationships, health, and peace are also forms of success, often the most important ones. Success should serve life, not consume it. The paradox of success reveals a profound truth. The higher you chase it, the more it runs ahead. But when you stop chasing and start aligning your life with what truly matters, success stops being an illusion of more and becomes a reflection of meaning. In the end, success is not about how high you climb, but about whether the climb took you somewhere worth being. Paradox of generosity. Generosity is one of the most admired human qualities. To give freely, whether it's time, love, kindness, or resources, creates connection and uplifts both the giver and the receiver. Acts of generosity are often remembered long after words are forgotten. Yet here lies the paradox of generosity. The more you give without balance, the more you risk feeling drained, unappreciated, or even taken for granted. What begins as a gift can slowly turn into a burden. At its core, generosity comes from abundance, not necessarily material abundance, but an inner wealth, a willingness to share what you have. It feels natural and fulfilling because humans are wired for connection. Giving makes us feel purposeful, but when generosity crosses into overgiving, it can erode boundaries. You may find yourself pouring into others while neglecting yourself, saying yes to every request, and mistaking self-sacrifice for kindness. The paradox is that generosity, when unbalanced, can deplete the very strength needed to keep giving. Another side of the paradox is how generosity can sometimes create unintended dependency. When you constantly rescue others, they may stop learning how to stand on their own. Your giving, meant to empower, can unintentionally disempower. In trying to lighten their load, you may carry weight that was never yours to hold. True generosity requires wisdom. It is not just about what you give, but about how and when you give it. There's also the emotional paradox of expectation. Pure generosity asks for nothing in return, but human nature often hopes for appreciation, gratitude, or at least recognition. When these don't come, resentment can build. You may feel invisible, unvalued, or used. The paradox is that generosity brings joy when it's genuine, but pain when it becomes a silent demand for validation. And yet, when generosity is practiced with balance, it is transformative. It strengthens relationships, fosters trust, and ripples outward in ways we may never see. A simple act of kindness can inspire others to give, creating a chain of goodness far beyond the original gesture. Generosity has a multiplying effect. It enriches not just the receiver, but the giver as well. Neuroscience even shows that acts of generosity activate reward centers in the brain, proving that giving is as beneficial to the giver as it is to the one receiving. So how do we live within this paradox? By pairing generosity with boundaries. Giving should never mean losing yourself. Healthy generosity comes from fullness, not emptiness, from sharing your resources, not depleting your soul. It means knowing when to say no, when to rest, and when to trust that others must carry their own responsibilities. The paradox of generosity teaches us that true giving is not about sacrificing endlessly, but about sharing wisely. It reminds us that love given without self-respect is not sustainable, and kindness without limits can become self-destruction. Real generosity is steady, thoughtful, and balanced. It lifts others without diminishing yourself. Paradox of freedom. Freedom is one of the deepest desires of the human spirit. We long to live without chains, to make choices for ourselves, and to shape our lives according to our own will. Entire societies are built around the pursuit of freedom, and people throughout history have sacrificed everything to attain it. Yet here lies the paradox of freedom. The more limitless it becomes, the more overwhelming, isolating, or even paralyzing it can feel. At its core, freedom is about choice. To be free means you are not forced into one path. You can decide where to go, what to do, and who to become. This sounds empowering, and often it is, but the more choices you have, the harder it becomes to decide. Psychologists call this the paradox of choice. With too many options, people feel anxious, indecisive, and dissatisfied. In chasing unlimited freedom, we can end up trapped in overthinking, forever unsure if we chose the right path. Another layer of the paradox is responsibility. True freedom doesn't mean the absence of limits. It means taking ownership of your life. But many people confuse freedom with the ability to do whatever they want, whenever they want. That kind of freedom often leads not to fulfillment, but to chaos, emptiness, or even self-destruction. Real freedom requires discipline, structure, and responsibility. Without those, freedom quickly collapses into slavery to impulse, addiction, or regret. Freedom also carries the paradox of belonging. On one hand, freedom is about individuality, being your own person. On the other, humans are social creatures who long for connection, family, and community. Too much emphasis on personal freedom can isolate us, cutting us off from the bonds that give life meaning. Yet too much dependence on others can suffocate individuality. The paradox of freedom lies in balancing independence with interdependence, knowing how to be you, self, without losing the ability to belong. There is also the paradox of sacrifice. To be truly free, you must sometimes give up certain freedoms. Athletes sacrifice comfort for discipline. Artists sacrifice stability for expression. Parents sacrifice personal freedom for the love of their children. In every meaningful pursuit, some freedoms must be surrendered for the sake of something greater. This reminds us that freedom is not just about removing limits. It is about choosing which limits are worth living by. And yet, freedom remains essential for a meaningful life. It allows creativity, exploration, and self-discovery. It gives us the power to dream and the courage to pursue those dreams. The paradox does not mean freedom is a burden, but that freedom without purpose can feel empty. The key is not to chase absolute freedom, but to use freedom wisely, to align it with values, commitments, and goals that matter. So how do we live within this paradox? By realizing that freedom is not found in having no boundaries, but in choosing the right ones. It is not found in avoiding responsibility, but in embracing it. It is not found in rejecting connection, but in learning how to balance individuality with belonging. The paradox of freedom teaches us a profound truth. Unlimited choice can feel like imprisonment, but purposeful choice creates liberation. Freedom is not about doing everything, it's about doing what truly matters. Paradox of knowledge. Knowledge has always been revered as a path to power, progress, and freedom. From ancient philosophers to modern scientists, humanity has pursued knowledge with relentless passion. We build schools, libraries, and technologies to expand it. We celebrate wisdom and admire intelligence. And yet, the deeper we dive into knowledge, the more we discover how little we actually know. This is the paradox of knowledge. The more it expands, the more it exposes the vastness of our ignorance. At its core, knowledge offers clarity. It helps us understand the world, solve problems, and make better choices. But every answer reveals new questions. The discovery of one truth uncovers the mystery of 10 more. For instance, centuries of science have unraveled much about the universe, yet each discovery only opens deeper layers of uncertainty. We've learned about galaxies, black holes, and quantum particles, but these answers often complicate our understanding rather than complete it. Knowledge does not close the book. It continually adds new chapters. Another layer of the paradox lies in arrogance. A little knowledge can make people feel powerful, confident, even superior, but true knowledge humbles because it reveals how much more there is to learn. The wisest individuals are often the most humble because they see the infinite depth of the unknown. Meanwhile, those who know little are sometimes the loudest in claiming certainty. This is the paradox. Ignorance often breeds confidence, while true knowledge breeds humility. Knowledge also has a paradoxical effect on peace of mind. On one hand, it frees us from superstition, fear, and limitation. On the other hand, it can burden us with anxiety. The more we know about global crises, mortality, or the fragility of life, the heavier reality can feel. A child may live happily in innocence, while an adult, burdened with awareness, feels the weight of too much truth. Knowledge can both liberate and trouble the human heart. There is also a paradox in the relationship between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is about facts, information, and data, while wisdom is about applying it meaningfully. A person may have vast knowledge but little wisdom, capable of reciting truths without understanding how to live by them. In this sense, knowledge without wisdom can be dangerous. Technology, for example, has given us incredible power, but without wisdom to guide it, that power can harm as much as it helps. The paradox reminds us that knowledge is not the final goal. It is a tool that must be shaped by wisdom. Knowledge also reshapes identity. As we learn, we evolve, but with each step, old beliefs may be challenged, even shattered. This can create inner conflict, because the pursuit of knowledge often forces us to question the very truths we once built our lives upon. Religious, cultural, or personal beliefs may shift in light of new understanding, and this can feel destabilizing. Yet without this discomfort, growth cannot happen. To learn is to change, and to change is to lose pieces of certainty. And yet, knowledge remains essential for human progress. It has cured diseases, built civilizations, and allowed us to explore beyond the stars. The paradox does not diminish its value. It reminds us to approach it with humility, responsibility, and balance. Knowledge is power, but it is also responsibility. It can build or destroy, enlighten or confuse, liberate or enslave. Its impact depends not on how much we know, but how wisely we use what we know. So how do we live within this paradox? By embracing both curiosity and humility, by realizing that it is okay not to have all the answers, by valuing wisdom as much as information, and by remembering that knowledge is not meant to make us superior, but to make us more compassionate, more responsible, and more aware of the mystery of existence. The paradox of knowledge teaches us that the greatest minds are not those who claim certainty, but those who remain students forever. The more you learn, the more you realize how infinite the universe truly is, and how small yet significant your place within it can be. Knowledge doesn't give us all the answers, but it does give us the courage to keep seeking, questioning, and growing. Paradox of peace. Peace is something almost every human being longs for. We seek it in our homes, in our relationships, in our nations, and most importantly, within ourselves. We believe that once peace is achieved, life will finally feel calm, balanced, and whole. Yet here lies the paradox of peace. The more we chase it, the more elusive it becomes. And often, true peace is found not in the absence of struggle, but in how we face and live through it. At its core, peace seems like stillness, the quiet of the mind, the absence of conflict, the removal of chaos. But real life rarely provides this perfect silence. There will always be challenges, disagreements, losses, and storms. Waiting for life to be free of conflict before feeling peaceful means you will wait forever. The paradox is that peace is not found by eliminating struggle. It is found by carrying calmness within the struggle itself. Another dimension of this paradox is external versus internal peace. Many believe peace comes from fixing the world around them, controlling circumstances, avoiding problems, or silencing opposition. But external control rarely brings lasting peace. The more we try to force everything into harmony, the more frustrated we become when life resists. True peace begins internally. It is an inner posture, a decision to remain centered, even when the world outside is chaotic. Without this, even perfect conditions will feel restless. There is also the paradox of vulnerability. To make peace with others, we often need humility, to listen, to compromise, to forgive. Yet this openness can feel risky because it makes us vulnerable to rejection or misunderstanding. Many avoid reconciliation to protect themselves, but in doing so, they carry hidden conflict within. The paradox is that peace requires strength disguised as softness. To achieve harmony, you must be willing to let go of ego, to release grudges, and to risk being open. On a personal level, the paradox of peace shows up in the restless human mind. We assume peace is something to be gained from external circumstances, a vacation, a quiet room, or a new lifestyle. But often, even when we finally reach those conditions, the mind continues racing. Peace is not the silence of the world, but the stillness of the heart. It is possible to be surrounded by noise and yet feel calm, just as it is possible to be in complete silence and still feel restless. Another paradox lies in justice and peace. We often say we want peace at any cost, but peace without justice is fragile. It is simply silence forced over wounds that have not healed. Real peace sometimes requires conflict, honesty, and disruption before harmony can be restored. Think of broken relationships. Sometimes, difficult conversations and temporary discomfort are necessary before deeper peace can emerge. In this way, peace is not always gentle. It can demand courage, confrontation, and truth. The paradox of peace also touches on desire. The more we obsessively crave peace, the more we notice its absence. Like trying to fall asleep, the harder you force it, the further it drifts away. Peace comes when you stop clutching at it and begin practicing presence, gratitude, and acceptance. It cannot be seized by force. It unfolds when you let go. And yet peace is not a passive state. It does not mean ignoring pain or pretending everything is fine. Real peace is active. It is choosing not to be consumed by bitterness, not to let anger dictate your actions, not to let fear dominate your mind. It is a strength disguised as serenity. It is not fragile avoidance, but resilient acceptance. So how do we live within this paradox? By realizing that peace is not a destination, but a practice. It is cultivated daily through forgiveness, mindfulness, gratitude, and patience. It is built not in perfect conditions, but in imperfect moments. It is tested in conflict, sharpened in hardship, and strengthened in surrender. The paradox of peace teaches us that life will never be free of storms. But peace does not require the storm to end. It requires you to become calm within it. True peace is not when the world stops demanding, but when your soul stops resisting. It is not the absence of noise, but the presence of stillness within. Paradox of self-improvement. Self-improvement is one of the most popular pursuits of modern life. Books, podcasts, seminars, and entire industries are dedicated to helping people become the best version of themselves. We are constantly encouraged to grow, to level up, to push beyond yesterday's limits. On the surface, this sounds noble. After all, who wouldn't want to improve? But here lies the paradox of self-improvement. The more obsessed you become with fixing yourself, the more you reinforce the idea that you are broken, and the more you chase better, the less you feel enough in the present moment. At its core, self-improvement is about growth. It teaches discipline, helps us break bad habits, and encourages us to pursue higher goals. But when it becomes an endless race, it robs us of peace. You begin to measure your worth only by how much progress you've made. Rest feels like failure. Contentment feels like laziness. The more you improve, the more flaws you find, and the cycle never ends. The paradox is that the very thing meant to make you whole can leave you feeling perpetually incomplete. Another layer of this paradox lies in comparison. Self-improvement often disguises itself as personal growth, but secretly feeds on measuring yourself against others. You look at those who seem healthier, richer, or more successful, and you conclude you are behind. Instead of motivating, this mindset becomes a trap because there will always be someone ahead of you. Improvement driven by comparison is endless dissatisfaction. No matter how much you achieve, it never feels like enough. There is also the paradox of identity. When you focus too much on self-improvement, you can lose sight of self-acceptance. You start living in the future version of yourself, the one who is more disciplined, more confident, more successful, while rejecting the person you are now. But the truth, So how do we live within this paradox? By balancing growth with grace. By striving to improve while also honoring who you are now. By remembering that discipline and acceptance are not opposites, they are partners. True self-improvement means evolving without abandoning yourself, growing without despising where you began. The paradox of self-improvement teaches us a powerful truth. You can pursue better while still being enough. You can honor today while preparing for tomorrow. You can grow without rejecting your roots. The goal is not to become a flawless version of yourself, but a truer one. Real self-improvement is not about erasing who you are, but about uncovering and strengthening the best of what has always been within you. Paradox of confidence. Confidence is often seen as the golden key to success. We admire those who walk into a room with certainty, who speak boldly, and who seem unshaken by doubt. Confidence promises freedom, the ability to express yourself fully without fear of judgment. Yet here lies the paradox of confidence. The more you chase it, the more insecure you may feel, and true confidence is often born not from eliminating doubt, but from learning to carry it with grace. At its surface, confidence looks like fearlessness. We imagine that confident people never doubt themselves, never feel nervous, and never question their worth. But in reality, even the most confident individuals feel moments of uncertainty. The difference is that they act anyway. Confidence is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to move forward despite it. The paradox is that waiting for fear to disappear before you act will only make fear stronger. Another dimension of this paradox lies in authenticity. Many people try to build confidence by putting on a mask, pretending to be louder, tougher, or more secure than they really are. This performance may impress others, but inside, it often deepens insecurity because you know the confidence isn't real. Genuine confidence, by contrast, doesn't come from pretending to be perfect. It comes from being comfortable with imperfection. The paradox is that vulnerability, not perfection, often inspires the deepest respect. Confidence is also tied to failure. We assume confidence comes from winning, from constant success. But in truth, confidence grows through failure, through discovering that you can fall and still rise, stumble and still continue. The more you fail and recover, the stronger your belief in yourself becomes. If you avoid risk to protect your confidence, you actually weaken it. Real confidence is not built in safety, but in resilience. And yet, confidence is not something you achieve once and for all. It rises and falls depending on context, challenges, and seasons of life. The paradox is that you can feel deeply confident in one area while still insecure in another, and that's normal. True confidence doesn't mean you never feel doubt. It means you stop letting doubt control your choices. So, how do we live within this paradox? By redefining confidence not as a flawless state of certainty, but as the courage to act while uncertain. By embracing vulnerability as a sign of strength, by learning from failure instead of fearing it, and by rooting your confidence in self-trust rather than external approval. The paradox of confidence teaches us this liberating truth. The most confident people are not those who never doubt, but those who keep moving even when doubt whispers. Real confidence is not built in pretending to be fearless, but in proving to yourself again and again that you are capable of walking forward even with fear beside you. Paradox of forgiveness. Forgiveness is often spoken of as a virtue, a sign of strength, and a path to inner peace. We are told that to forgive is to free ourselves, to let go of anger and resentment so that healing can take place. Yet forgiveness is one of the hardest things to practice, especially when the wounds run deep. Here lies the paradox of forgiveness. In letting someone else off the hook, you actually free yourself, and in releasing the weight of the past, you regain control over your own future. At first glance, forgiveness feels like surrender. Many believe that forgiving means excusing what was done, minimizing the pain, or pretending the wrong never happened. This misconception makes forgiveness feel unfair, almost like betraying yourself. Why should the one who caused harm be given peace so easily? But the paradox is that forgiveness is not about freeing them, it's about freeing you. Resentment ties you to the past. Forgiveness severs that chain. Another layer of the paradox is justice versus healing. We long for justice, for wrongs to be acknowledged and punished. Forgiveness can feel like abandoning justice, as if we are letting people get away with their actions. But forgiveness does not erase accountability. It simply shifts the weight of carrying the pain. You can forgive someone while still setting boundaries, seeking justice, or choosing not to reconcile. Forgiveness is not a gift for them. It is a decision for you. The paradox also reveals itself in timing. Forgiveness cannot be forced. People often say, just let it go, as if healing were immediate. But real forgiveness takes time, and forcing it too soon can deepen wounds. The paradox is that forgiveness feels impossible at first, yet over time, it becomes inevitable if you truly want freedom. Holding on to resentment may feel powerful in the short term, but over the years, it drains energy and corrodes the spirit. On a personal level, forgiveness challenges identity. When someone hurts us, pain becomes part of our story. Letting go of that pain can feel like letting go of a piece of ourselves. Sometimes we hold on to anger because it feels like protection. It reminds us not to trust again, not to be vulnerable. Yet this protection becomes a prison. The paradox is that forgiveness feels like weakness, but it is actually the deepest form of strength. It requires courage to release what is weighing you down. Forgiveness also extends beyond others. It must include ourselves. Often the hardest person to forgive is the one in the mirror. We replay our mistakes, punish ourselves with guilt, and convince ourselves that we do not deserve peace. But self-forgiveness is essential, because without it, growth is stunted. The paradox is that we fear forgiving ourselves will make us complacent. Yet it is only through forgiveness that true change becomes possible. Guilt may remind us of failure, but forgiveness allows us to rise again. There's another paradox. Forgiveness is both an event and a process. You may decide in one moment to forgive, but the feelings of anger or pain may return later. This does not mean you failed. It means forgiveness must be practiced repeatedly until the wound loses its hold. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It is remembering without letting the memory control you. And yet, forgiveness does not mean reconciliation. You can forgive someone and still choose distance. You can release the bitterness without reopening the door. Forgiveness is about your inner freedom, not about restoring a broken bond that may be unsafe to rebuild. The paradox is that you can let go while still protecting yourself, and you can heal without allowing the same harm again. So, how do we live within this paradox? By realizing that forgiveness is not a favor to the offender, but a gift to yourself. By understanding that you do not have to erase the past to move forward. You only need to stop carrying it. By practicing forgiveness as an act of strength, not surrender. The paradox of forgiveness teaches us this. When you hold on to anger, the person who hurt you continues to have power over your life. But when you forgive, you take that power back. Forgiveness does not erase the past, but it releases its grip on your present, allowing you to walk freely into the future. Paradox of desire. Desire is at the heart of the human experience. It drives ambition, fuels creativity, and gives us direction. Without desire, life would feel stagnant. There would be no hunger to grow, no motivation to pursue love, achievement, or meaning. And yet, here lies the paradox of desire. The more we chase it, the more it escapes us. And fulfillment often comes not from satisfying every want, but from learning to master desire itself. At its core, desire begins as a spark. You see something, a goal, a relationship, an opportunity, and it awakens longing. This longing can be powerful, energizing, even life-changing. Desire can pull us out of comfort zones, inspire inventions, or lead us to form deep connections. But unchecked desire quickly transforms into restlessness. The moment one desire is fulfilled, another appears, and the cycle never ends. The paradox is that desire promises satisfaction, but often breeds more desire instead. Another layer of this paradox lies in attachment. The stronger we cling to what we want, the more suffering we create when it slips away. Desire becomes dangerous when it turns into obsession, when it convinces us that happiness depends on its fulfillment. This is why so many people achieve their goals yet feel strangely empty afterward. They believed the achievement would complete them, only to realize that desire had already shifted its target to something else. There is also the paradox of pleasure. Desire is rooted in anticipation, and often, the anticipation itself is more powerful than the reality. The longing, the imagining, the pursuit, these carry an intensity that fulfillment cannot always match. Think of how often people dream of success, wealth, or love, only to find that the actual experience feels less magical than the fantasy. The chase excites us. The capture leaves us restless for the next chase. Philosophers and ritual traditions have long wrestled with this paradox. Buddhism teaches that desire is the root of suffering because clinging leads to endless dissatisfaction. Stoicism suggests mastering desire by wanting less, not more. Modern psychology points out that desire activates reward systems in the brain that create temporary satisfaction but long-term craving. In every tradition, the truth emerges. Unchecked desire controls us more than we control it. Another paradox within desire is that sometimes denying it gives us more strength than indulging it. When we practice discipline, we discover freedom. For example, choosing not to indulge every craving, whether it's for food, pleasure, or validation, builds self-mastery. In contrast, giving in to every desire makes us slaves to impulse. The paradox is that true power comes not from fulfilling all your wants, but from being free enough to choose which desires are worth pursuing. Desire also shapes relationships. Longing for love can bring deep connection, but when desire turns into neediness, it suffocates. The more you cling, the more distance grows. Ironically, love rooted in desperate desire pushes people away, while love rooted in freedom and balance draws people closer. The paradox is that the less you cling, the stronger your connections become. And yet, desire is not something to destroy. It is part of being human. Without it, we would lack motivation, creativity, and vision. The key is not to erase desire, but to transform it. Desire becomes healthy when it aligns with purpose, when it drives growth without enslaving us. It becomes a guiding flame rather than a consuming fire. So how do we live within this paradox? By learning to recognize which desires bring depth and which bring emptiness. By practicing gratitude for what we already have instead of constantly chasing what is missing. By understanding that fulfillment does not come from satisfying every craving, but from learning how to carry desire wisely, without letting it control our worth or happiness. The paradox of desire teaches us this. The more you believe happiness is waiting at the end of a fulfilled desire, the more it slips away. But when you learn to appreciate the journey, to master your wants instead of being mastered by them, desire transforms. It becomes a source of energy, not suffering. In the end, true fulfillment is not found in having everything you desire, but in desiring wisely and living in peace with what you already hold. Paradox of mistakes. Mistakes are among the most feared aspects of human life. From an early age, we are taught to avoid them, to strive for correctness, and to treat mistakes as signs of weakness or failure. Society often rewards perfection and punishes error, making us anxious about slipping even once. And yet, here lies the paradox of mistakes. The very errors we try so hard to avoid often become our greatest teachers, shaping wisdom, resilience, and growth in ways success never could. At its surface, mistakes appear as obstacles. They interrupt our plans, expose our flaws, and sometimes bring embarrassment, loss, or even pain. In a culture obsessed with achievement, mistakes carry stigma. They are seen as proof that we are unprepared, careless, or incapable. This is why so many people fear taking risks. The possibility of failure feels unbearable. Yet paradoxically, a life without mistakes is also a life without growth. If you never risk error, you never step into new territory. Another dimension of this paradox is that mistakes often reveal truths success hides. Success can inflate ego, giving us the illusion that we are in control. Mistakes strip away that illusion and show us where we are vulnerable, where we need to improve, and where humility is required. In this way, mistakes are mirrors. They reflect reality without distortion. While success makes us feel good, mistakes make us grow wise. There is also the paradox of perspective. A mistake in the present often feels devastating, but in hindsight, it can be the very turning point that shaped a better future. Many people look back on failures, jobs lost, relationships broken, opportunities missed, and realize those mistakes redirected them towards something greater. What once felt like ruin later feels like rescue. The paradox is that mistakes rarely feel like gifts when they happen, but they often become the most valuable gifts of all. Mistakes also play a critical role in resilience. Each time we stumble and recover, we build strength. Confidence does not come from never failing. It comes from knowing you can fail and still rise again. People who never experience mistakes may appear confident, but their strength is untested. True resilience is forged in the fire of error, through the process of falling, reflecting, and standing again. Another paradox lies in relationships. Mistakes can strain trust and cause conflict, but they also create opportunities for forgiveness, empathy, and deeper connection. When we admit our mistakes, we show vulnerability, which allows others to see us as human. Relationships built on the illusion of perfection are fragile, but those that survive mistakes often grow stronger. The paradox is that mistakes can both break and deepen bonds, depending on how they are handled. There's also the paradox of creativity and innovation. Almost every great invention, discovery, or work of art was born out of mistakes. Trial and error is the foundation of progress. Scientists, entrepreneurs, and artists embrace mistakes as part of the process, knowing that each failure brings them closer to breakthrough. Perfectionists may avoid mistakes, but in doing so, they also avoid discovery. The paradox is that innovation depends on error. It is the price of creating something new. And yet, mistakes do not mean we should act carelessly. Wisdom is not in avoiding mistakes, but in learning from them. Repeating the same mistake without reflection leads to stagnation, but acknowledging mistakes, extracting lessons, and adjusting course transforms failure into growth. The paradox is that mistakes lose their power when we stop fearing them and start using them. So, how do we live within this paradox? By shifting how we define mistakes. Instead of treating them as proof of inadequacy, we treat them as part of the path. Instead of fearing them, we expect them. Instead of letting them break us, we allow them to build us. Mistakes are not the end of the story. They are chapters in the story of becoming. The paradox of mistakes teaches us that the moments we wish to erase often shape us the most. The errors we hide in shame may be the very experiences that craft our strength and wisdom. In the end, a mistake is not a sign you are failing at life. It is a sign you are living it, learning it, and daring to grow beyond what you once were. Paradox of effort. Effort is celebrated as the path to achievement. From childhood, we are taught that if we work hard enough, we can accomplish anything. That discipline and determination will always carry us forward. Effort is the currency of progress, the bridge between where we are and where we want to be. And yet, here lies the paradox of effort. Sometimes the harder you try, the further the goal seems, and often the greatest breakthroughs come not from straining, but from letting go. On the surface, effort appears straightforward. If you push harder, you should move further. And in many cases, this is true. Without effort, goals remain dreams. Yet, life is not a simple equation of input and output. Sometimes effort produces diminishing returns. The harder you grip, the more things slip away. Like trying to fall asleep, the more effort you put into forcing rest, the more restless you become. The paradox is that some outcomes cannot be achieved by effort alone, but by surrender, patience, and trust. Another layer of this paradox lies in balance. Effort is necessary for growth, but overexertion leads to burnout. Society glorifies hustle culture, the idea that working nonstop is the ultimate virtue, but endless striving drains the body, clouds the mind, and dulls creativity. True progress often requires stepping back, resting, and allowing space for renewal. Ironically, when you stop pushing so hard, clarity and solutions emerge. The paradox is that rest, which feels like the opposite of effort, often multiplies the results of your effort. There is also the paradox of control. Effort gives us the illusion that we can shape everything if we just try harder. But life resists control, no matter how much effort you invest. Some outcomes remain beyond reach. Love cannot be forced, creativity cannot be demanded, and peace cannot be engineered through sheer will. In these cases, effort becomes counterproductive. Real mastery lies in knowing when to act and when to release, when to fight and when to flow. Another dimension is the relationship between effort and joy. When effort is fueled by love, passion, or purpose, it feels light, even exhilarating. But when effort is driven by fear, insecurity, or comparison, it feels heavy and draining. The paradox is that effort made with ease of spirit often achieves more than effort made with desperate strain. It is not just how much you do, but the energy with which you do it that determines the outcome. Effort also shapes identity. We admire hard workers, seeing effort as proof of character, but this can lead to over-identification, believing that our worth depends entirely on how much effort we exert. This mindset creates guilt when resting, shame when progress slows, and emptiness when effort does not lead to the expected results. The paradox is that effort is valuable, but it is not the measure of your worth. There's another paradox in learning and skill. Beginners often believe effort is everything. Practice more, push harder, but mastery requires relaxation. Athletes, musicians, and performers know that excessive tension ruins performance. The most skilled are those who appear effortless because they have learned to blend discipline with flow. The paradox is that true excellence looks easy, not strained. And yet, effort is still essential. It is the foundation of discipline, the engine of persistence, and the gateway to achievement. The paradox does not suggest abandoning effort. It suggests refining it. To work with wisdom, not just with willpower. To understand that effort is a tool, not a prison. So how do we live within this paradox? By recognizing when effort is required and when surrender is wiser. By working hard, but not at the cost of health or joy. By understanding that effort must be read with patience, rest, and trust in life's timing. The paradox of effort teaches us this. You cannot force everything into existence. Some things must be nurtured, allowed, or invited rather than wrestled into being. Effort opens doors, but surrender allows you to walk through them. Real success lies not in endless struggle, but in knowing when to push and when to let go. Paradox of ambition. Ambition is one of humanity's greatest driving forces. It pushes people to dream bigger, to break barriers, to create empires, and to pursue goals that once seemed impossible. Without ambition, progress would stall. Civilizations would not advance, innovations would not emerge, and personal growth would remain stagnant. And yet here lies the paradox of ambition. The very hunger that propels us forward can also consume us, leaving us restless, unsatisfied, and sometimes even empty. No matter how much we achieve. At its heart, ambition is a spark of desire. It takes a vision of the future and transforms it into determination. It is what motivates students to study late into the night, entrepreneurs to risk everything, and artists to keep creating despite failure. But unchecked ambition can become a relentless fire, one that burns through joy, peace, and relationships. The paradox is that ambition promises fulfillment through achievement. But too often, it creates a life where achievement is endless, and contentment is always delayed. Another layer of the paradox lies in identity. Ambition drives people to prove themselves, to climb ladders, and to be recognized. But when self-worth becomes tied only to ambition, you begin to measure yourself solely by success and failure. Every victory is temporary, because the next challenge immediately replaces it. Instead of enjoying progress, you live in a cycle of striving without rest. The paradox is that ambition, meant to give you purpose, can also trap you in a constant chase with no finish line. There is also the paradox of sacrifice. Ambition often demands trade-offs: time, health, relationships, and even peace of mind. To achieve greatness, people sacrifice sleep, comfort, and sometimes love. These sacrifices can feel justified in the moment, but over time they raise the question, what is ambition worth if? Paradox of leadership. Leadership is one of the most sought-after qualities in the modern world. Companies, communities, and nations look for strong leaders, those who can inspire, direct, and bring about change. Leadership is often associated with power, authority, and influence. Yet here lies the paradox of leadership. True leadership is not about taking control, but about giving it. Not about being served, but about serving. Not about standing above others, but about standing with them. At its surface, leadership seems like a position of dominance. A leader is the one in front, the one making decisions, the one carrying responsibility. Many pursue leadership for status, recognition, or authority. But genuine leadership flips this idea upside down. The best leaders are not those who demand loyalty, but those who earn it through humility, vision, and care. The paradox is that leadership, which appears to be about power, is actually about responsibility and sacrifice. Another layer of this paradox lies in influence. Leaders often want control, believing they must dictate every detail to achieve success. But micromanagement suffocates growth. Real leaders empower others, creating space for people to rise and shine on their own. The paradox is that the less a leader clings to control, the more influence they truly have, because people follow those who make them feel capable, not those who make them feel small. There is also the paradox of visibility. Leaders are highly visible, standing at the forefront of decisions, yet true leadership often works in the background. The greatest leaders are not always the loudest voices, but the steady hands guiding the group quietly. Their strength lies not in drawing attention to themselves, but in directing attention to the mission. The paradox is that leadership shines brightest when the spotlight is shared, not hoarded. Leadership Al. The paradox of leadership teaches us this. The greatest leaders are not those who command the loudest, but those who inspire the deepest. They are remembered not for how much power they held, but for how much good they created in others. Leadership, in its truest form, is not about being in charge. It is about caring for those in your charge. Paradox of kindness. Kindness is universally praised as one of the highest virtues. We are taught from childhood to be kind, to treat others with respect, to help when we can, and to show compassion. It is often described as a simple act with powerful ripple effects, that even the smallest kindness can change a life. And yet, here lies the paradox of kindness. Though kindness is freely given, it is not always returned. Though it is a sign of strength, it is often mistaken for weakness. And though it is one of the purest human qualities, it sometimes brings pain to the very person who practices it. At first glance, kindness seems effortless, an act of goodwill, a gesture of care, a word of encouragement. But true kindness is not always easy. It demands patience when anger feels easier, generosity when selfishness feels safer, and forgiveness when resentment feels justified. The paradox is that kindness requires strength disguised as gentleness. It is not passive. It is a conscious choice to rise above instinct and choose compassion instead. Another layer of the paradox lies in how kindness is perceived. People often mistake kindness for naivety, assuming that those who are kind are weak, gullible, or easily manipulated. In truth, it takes far more courage to remain kind in a cruel world than it does to harden yourself with bitterness. Kindness is not weakness, it is resistance. The paradox is that what looks like softness is often the greatest form of inner power. Kindness also carries the paradox of sacrifice. To be kind often means giving up time, energy, or resources for the sake of others. Sometimes it means carrying burdens that are not your own. And while this can bring deep fulfillment, it can also bring exhaustion if boundaries are not respected. Too much kindness without balance can lead to burnout, resentment, or exploitation. The paradox is that kindness must be. So how do we live within this paradox? By practicing kindness with strength, not weakness. By setting boundaries so kindness remains sustainable. By offering it freely, without demanding return. And by remembering that kindness is less about how the world treats you, and more about how you choose to treat the world. The paradox of kindness teaches us this. Kindness may not always be returned, but it is never wasted. Every act plants a seed, whether you see its growth or not. True kindness does not depend on outcome. it depends on your character. And in choosing kindness again and again, you shape not only the lives of others, but also the soul of who you are becoming. Paradox of opportunity. Opportunity is often described as the door to success, the chance that can change everything. We are told to seize the moment, to never let opportunities slip away, and to believe that one good opportunity can transform our lives. Opportunity is painted as something rare, precious, and life-defining. And yet, here lies the paradox of opportunity. While opportunities can open new paths, too many choices can paralyze us, and chasing every opportunity can distract us from the ones that truly matter. At its surface, opportunity looks simple, an open door you just need to walk through. It could be a new job, a relationship, a business idea, or a chance to learn. The very word carries excitement and possibility, but not every open door leads to fulfillment. Some doors lead to detours, distractions, or even traps. The paradox is that opportunities are abundant, but wisdom lies in knowing which to pursue and which to leave behind. Another layer of this paradox lies in timing. Opportunities often arrive at inconvenient moments. Sometimes they appear when we feel unprepared, and other times they vanish before we are ready to act. Waiting too long can close the door, but acting too quickly can lead to regret. The paradox is that opportunity demands both courage and patience, two qualities that often conflict with each other. There is also the paradox of scarcity versus abundance. Many people believe opportunities are rare, which creates fear of missing out. This fear can lead to grasping at everything, spreading energy too thin, and never committing deeply to one path. Others believe opportunities are endless, which can cause complacency, assuming there will always be another chance. Both mindsets can be dangerous. The paradox is that opportunities are both plentiful and fleeting, and success depends on discerning which ones align with your values and timing. The paradox of opportunity teaches us this. Life is full of doors, but not every door leads to meaning. The key is not to chase every chance, but to choose the ones that align with who you are becoming. Opportunity is not about grabbing everything. It is about recognizing the right moment, stepping with courage, and trusting that what is meant for you will not pass you by. Paradox of presence. Presence is often described as the art of living fully in the moment, being aware, attentive, and connected to what is happening here and now. It is praised in mindfulness teachings, meditation practices, and philosophies that remind us life is only ever lived in the present. Presence promises peace, clarity, and freedom from regret or anxiety. And yet, here lies the paradox of presence. The more you try to force yourself to be present, the more elusive it becomes, and true presence often arrives only when you stop trying to grasp it. At first glance, presence seems simple. Just pay attention, notice your breath, look around, and be in the now. But the human mind is restless by nature. It drifts toward the past, replaying old mistakes or memories, or leaps into the future, planning and worrying. Trying to force the mind into presence often creates more frustration than calm. The paradox is that presence cannot be demanded. It must be allowed. It comes not from control, but from release. Another layer of this paradox lies in awareness versus distraction. Technology, endless notifications, and constant noise pull us away from the moment. We are physically in one place but mentally scattered across many. Ironically, even practices meant to bring presence, like journaling, meditation, or breathwork, can become obsessions, where people chase presence as if it were another achievement. The paradox is that presence is lost when we treat it as a task rather than a natural state. There is also the paradox of presence and productivity. Many fear that being fully present means abandoning ambition, planning, or progress. If you live only in the moment, how do you prepare for the future? But presence does not mean carelessness. It means bringing full attention to each step, which actually enhances effectiveness. When you work with presence, you make fewer mistakes. So how do we live within this paradox? By slowing down, by noticing small details, by allowing stillness without demanding it, by realizing that presence is not about perfection. It is about returning again and again, gently, to this moment. By remembering that every breath, every touch, every glance is an opportunity to return home to now. The paradox of presence teaches us this. The present moment cannot be controlled or possessed. It can only be lived. And the more gently you enter it, the more it reveals its depth. Presence is not something to chase, but something to surrender into. And in that surrender, you discover that life itself has been waiting for you here all along. Paradox of control. Control is one of the strongest illusions we cling to in life. From the moment we wake up, we attempt to structure, plan, and predict our day. We write to-do lists, map out goals, create routines, and try to keep every part of our world organized. It feels safe to believe that the more control we hold, the more secure our lives will be. Control gives us the comforting sense that chaos can be tamed. And yet, here lies the paradox of control. The tighter we grip, the more life slips through our fingers, and the more we surrender, the more peace and real power we discover. At first glance, control seems logical. If you manage your finances carefully, you avoid debt. If you plan your time well, you accomplish more. If you discipline yourself, you gain stability. In these ways, control serves us. But life refuses to bend fully to our will. No matter how carefully we plan, unexpected changes arrive. Health falters, people leave, opportunities vanish, and sudden challenges appear. Control convinces us we are steering the ship, but storms remind us that much of the sea is beyond our command. Another layer of this paradox lies in anxiety. The desire for control often comes from fear, the fear of uncertainty, of loss, of failure. We believe that if we control enough variables, we can avoid pain. But the harder we try to control every detail, the more anxious we become, because perfection is impossible. Instead of freedom, control creates chains. The paradox is that in trying to protect ourselves from chaos, we create inner chaos through endless worry. Relationships reveal another deep side of this paradox. Many people attempt to control others, partners, friends, children, employees, believing it will bring closeness, loyalty, or safety. But control suffocates. It strips others of autonomy, breeds resentment, and weakens trust. Love, trust, and respect cannot grow, and yet control is not meaningless. Some control is healthy. Discipline, boundaries, and responsibility give structure to life. Self-control allows you to choose wisely rather than live by impulse. The paradox does not ask us to abandon control entirely, but to redirect it. Focus on what is truly within your power. Your actions, your words, your attitude, your perspective. Release the rest, for it was never truly yours to command. So how do we live within this paradox? By holding control lightly. By planning, but also remaining open to change. By practicing responsibility, but also allowing trust. By realizing that much of life cannot be mastered, only experienced. The paradox of control teaches us that peace is not found in dominating life, but in flowing with it. The more you let go, the more you discover that life has a way of unfolding exactly as it should. The paradox of control is this: the tighter you hold, the more fragile life feels. The more you release, the stronger you become. Real control is not about commanding the world, but about mastering yourself. Paradox of fame. Fame is one of the most intoxicating dreams of human beings. Across cultures and generations, people have longed to be seen, admired, and remembered. The idea of fame carries with it the promise of recognition, wealth, and influence. To be famous seems to mean you matter, that your voice is heard, your work is valued, and your presence leaves an undeniable mark on the world. Yet here lies the paradox of fame. While it promises validation and fulfillment, it often brings emptiness, isolation, and the loss of the very freedom people sought in the first place. At first glance, fame looks like the ultimate reward. It seems to turn ordinary individuals into icons, lifting them above the crowd into a place of admiration. Fans cheer, opportunities multiply, and the famous are showered with attention. But beneath the surface, fame often strips away the simple joys of being human. Privacy disappears, every action is scrutinized, and mistakes become headlines. The paradox is that fame gives visibility, but steals invisibility, and sometimes it is the ability to be unseen that brings true peace. Another layer of the paradox lies in identity. Many chase fame to feel important, to fill inner emptiness with external validation. But when fame arrives, it rarely satisfies the hunger. Instead, it magnifies insecurities. Approval feels conditional, dependent on performance, image, or trends. One day the crowd loves you. The next, it turns against you. The paradox is that fame, which is sought to build self-worth, often makes worth feel even more fragile. Fame also creates the paradox of closeness and distance. Millions may know your name, your face, your story, but very few truly know your soul. Fame surrounds people with admirers, but can leave them lonelier than ever. Relationships become complicated. Who loves you for who you are, and who loves you for what you represent. So how do we live within this paradox? By shifting our pursuit from fame to meaning, by focusing less on how many people see us and more on how deeply we affect those around us. By remembering that being known by millions is not the same as being loved by a few, and by realizing that recognition may fade, but authenticity leaves an imprint that endures. The paradox of fame teaches us this. The world may applaud you one day and forget you the next, but what truly matters is not being famous, it is being real. Fame may bring noise, but meaning brings peace. The choice is not whether to chase the spotlight, but whether you can live with integrity when the lights eventually dim.